Hey everyone, Geophysicist Stefan Burns here. We have a bit of a weird story to get into today. There's some unusual events that are occurring around the globe. We're going to dive into some history and also what may occur in the future according to two different prophets, because there's a whole bunch of things that seem to be coalescing and condensing into something that may become very, very real. I'm talking about a very large cataclysmic event in the Pacific Ocean in between Japan and the Philippines this July. I want to state right from the beginning, by no means is this guaranteed. I'm not someone that thinks something's going to 100% happen and then convince everyone that's the case, but we are exploring some of these prophetic visions that have been had and looking at some of the other things that have been happening leading up to that date that they have given, which is July 5th, 2025, or just in general July of 2025, and also some of the history of the area. For example, there is a nuclear bomb that's been lost in that zone. They are claiming that there's going to be a massive volcanic slash earthquake event, perhaps even just a huge explosion, and then a massive tsunami is going to result from that. And just in the past, like 3, 4, 5 days, we have had 4 oarfish wash up around the globe. These are very, very, very rare deep sea creatures. They are the longest bony fish in existence, and they live by just hanging out vertically in the water column, kind of like this. Is a very odd existence, but they are typically found very deep in the ocean. They do not come up to the surface. If they do, they die. And usually find 1, maybe 2, very rarely. We've seen 4 now in probably about the same amount of days, 4 days. The first one was sighted on Monday, June 2nd, and that was down here in Tasmania. We had them mapped out here on Google Earth. So that was the first oarfish. And what's so special about this is that they're known as doomsday fish. That's just a colloquial term for them. It stems from some of the folklore in Japanese culture, especially in the past, and they were seen as an omen of some sort of climatic change coming in, like an earthquake or a tsunami. So they're known as doomsday fish. Not everyone believes that, of course. There was a research paper that came out in 2019 that looked at oarfish sightings and earthquakes, and it came to the conclusion that there's no connection between them. You can read that if you want. Just, there's varying opinions on this. But I'm someone that remains open to these things. I don't necessarily subscribe instantly to them. I remain a skeptical mindset, but I think that there's something to this stuff. There's usually some gems hidden in the rough, some truth in every single tale, legend, story, myth, etc. So not only did we get this oarfish wash up in Tasmania, we also had 2 oarfish wash up just in the past 24, 40 hours in New Zealand, all just in the past few days. You see here both of them on the South Island, and these dates here may not be exactly accurate. It was hard to get exact times for these oarfish sightings, but what I also discovered today is that there was an oarfish that was sighted in India. So we're going to look at these sightings here, but that's just a rough location. It was somewhere in this zone in India, but that also occurred in this time frame. So originally, when I was preparing for this video, I thought it was just these 3 locations. Turns out we've had 4 doomsday fish wash up, deep sea denizens that you very rarely see, that have a known folklore associated with them, connecting them to cataclysmic events like high magnitude earthquakes and tsunamis. And then we have these 2 prophetic visions that have been given, one from a Japanese person, another from someone from Thailand, both for July 2025, for there being some sort of underwater cataclysm kind of in this zone. So let's get into that. Let's start with our doomsday fish, and this is an interesting story. So we got a lot to go through today. Hello, welcome everyone. Again, I'm your host, Stefan Burns. On this channel, we discuss what's happening with the Earth energetically. We look at geologic events, geophysical energies, also space weather, solar activity, planetary resonances. We'll be going into the really powerful astrology that's currently active right now in 2025, 2026, which adds a lot of context to this entire story. It's very archetypally resonant, you could say, which is why I'm going to bring it up later at the end of the video, and also much more. So here we have our first article from The Guardian. 3 giant doomsday fish wash up in 1 week, and the birds got the heads, but they wash up on the beach, dead, not good. Here again is the sightings of them. But 3 in a week, this is talking about whether, they are a sign of some sort of calamity on the way or not. And we're not hoping for any sort of cataclysm. Let me state that right from the get-go. I'm not hoping for a cataclysm. I know some of you folks may out there want that, some sort of world reset or whatever. I think there's a lot of problems with the world, but do I want there to be a massive catastrophic event? No, I don't. And I also think that what we put our mind to is what we manifest. So we have to be very mindful of that. So I'm not also trying to manifest anything. I'm just bringing all this together, showing that there's some weird stuff happening, okay? Then we see this oarfish that was found in India. It took 7 men to hold this thing up. That shows how long this is. And I think they caught it in a net, but they're not near the, they're not near the surface of the water unless something's wrong. They do sometimes hang out in like the mid-water column, which is still very deep, but not like the deep abyss. But they can go down to those ultra deep areas of the ocean. And so one of the kind of speculative ideas is that when you have these doomsday fish sightings or these oarfish sightings at the surface, it's signaling changes that are occurring at depth. And as a result, maybe some sort of shock wave or some sort of eruption or gas or something is causing them to flee to the surface, where they then depressurize and die. That's kind of the idea. So 4 sightings of doomsday fish, which is remarkable, in less than a week. Here we have a map showing our currents of the ocean and also wind patterns. And we're just going to show here we have Tasmania and New Zealand. And you will notice that here's our ocean currents underlaying these kind of white wind currents. So those are the 2. The colorful ones are the ocean currents. We see this ocean current going here and then going up, and we see the wind pattern going really nicely from Tasmania like this, and then actually right up to New Zealand. So there is a natural flow of energy between those 2 spots, which is where we saw 3 of the doomsday fish. Of course, 1 is way up in India, but perhaps there's some weird stuff happening down here. I don't know. It's just very bizarre that we saw 3 of these fish wash up in really quick succession right here in this zone. And it's even more bizarre that we got 1 off the coast of India as well. So these are our ocean currents and wind map, just to get a sense of maybe the flow of the ocean in these zones. But India is pretty far away from, of course, Tasmania and New Zealand. So this is even, if we take all 4 of these sightings together, speaking to perhaps something larger occurring, which is interesting to kind of contemplate. And we also, just to add in, it's not just doomsday fish. We've had 9 dead whales in the San Francisco Bay Area in the last 2 weeks. And there's also, I believe, some dead whales up in Seattle. This is all the Pacific Ocean, basically. So this is odd. There's a lot of unusual things happening all the time. Let's just say that. But this is certainly odd. My intuition is telling me that something's changing with the oceans, and this is why we're getting some of these things happening. What that is, I don't exactly know, but as we went in on the last live stream, we discussed the secret history of nuclear testing and how very odd it was that all the nuclear testing just stopped in the 90s, except for basically North Korea, and how there very well could be covert nuclear testing occurring deep in the ocean, away in these quiet zones, away from all the different monitoring networks of like the seismographs and the hydrophones and more, in order to do it in a concealed manner, not privy to the public. That's very possible. It makes sense. Why wouldn't you test your stuff out, your most powerful weapons, and keep that arsenal up to date rather than letting it go into disarray for 30 years, and that's your main power lever on the global stage? You would do it covertly. So, we're seeing these changes with the ocean, and we're seeing dead whales, oarfish coming up from the deep, and we have these prophetic visions. We've also had a lot of earthquakes. So before we get into some of the prophetic stuff, we've had a lot of earthquakes over the past 30 days in this area. Specifically for New Zealand in the Kermadec Trench, we had like an earthquake burst right here. And I'll switch this to be earthquakes only on the map. So we see 6.2, 6.0, 6.1, some up in Vanuatu as well, some in Tonga. But that's a lot of earthquakes in this zone, definitely more than normal. This area does get earthquakes, big earthquakes. This is a notable subduction zone, but these all occurred within just 8 hours of each other. Boom, boom, boom. So a lot of earthquakes there. And then on the same day, basically same 36-hour time stretch, you could say, we have these two earthquakes here in Japan, 5.8 and a magnitude 6. This is all around the end of May, the beginning of June. And something to note is that we just had Saturn move into Aries if we use the Western Tropical Astrology system. Neptune is in Aries. What did they move out of? They moved from Pisces to Aries. Pisces is water element, Aries is fire. Pisces is the end of the zodiac, Aries is the beginning of the zodiac, indicating some sort of new cycle, new initiation, some sort of new birth type event. And Pisces is very much representative of the ocean, like the deep ocean. So we have this shift that's occurring. We'll talk about the astrology more, but as this is unfolding, we're seeing a lot of changes with our oceans and a lot of new volcanism. Mount Etna just blasted off a pyroclastic flow. Fuego in Guatemala had a huge eruption and also pyroclastic flow. Let's check out, as we're talking about Aries, let's check this out. This is really quite wild. We have actually been seeing the sign of Aries in our reality very prominently over the past about month or so. So if we look at our sun there, we had this massive plasma filament launch. This was May 12th and of this year, of course. And look how the plasma filaments make the sign of Aries. Let me pause this right when it hits that alignment, right about there. So we see the sign of Aries basically with this massive structure on the sun, many, many, many times larger than the Earth, of course, because this is the sun. And this is the actual, the sign of Aries right there. Then also just like within the past couple days, we've had this lava fountain at Kilauea Volcano, which is of course in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, fed by the deep Earth. And this is episode 24. And this was making the sign of Aries. So just an interesting thing. You don't put too much into this, but sometimes I've found in my own personal life experience that the universe really directly shows you what's happening and the energies that are unfolding, and it doesn't take a genius to figure it out. And so I look at this and I'm like, okay, looks like we have some really strong Aries energy. And you consider the fact that Neptune just shifted into Aries first time in 164 years. This is 164 years. And now Saturn is there, and that they are going to make a conjunction in Aries at 0 degrees, which is something that historically hasn't happened really since like negative or like 600 BCE. So, 2,600 years ago, and that wasn't at 0 degrees. That was at an early degree, like 2, 3 or something like that. This is at 0 degrees. Basically initiating a whole new cycle, a massive new cycle. This is kind of showing like, hey, this is some big stuff coming in. Explosive solar activity. This gave us a pretty big solar storm impact. And explosive volcanic activity, which is very resonant with Aries. The sun is exalted in the sign of Aries, and Aries is all about new birth, creation, right? The entire mythology of the Hawaiian Islands is that of creation, fire, and Hawaii, came up out of the middle of the Pacific Ocean. So it's all very, very, very resonant, which I find interesting. And so let's go more into the astrology while we're here. Then we'll go into the prophetic stuff, because this is laying out the overall archetypal framework that's in the background through 2026 and even a little bit into 2032. We'll talk about as well, which is very resonant with what these prophets, you could say, saw. Now, whether they're going to be accurate or not, I don't know, but they've each been accurate on a really significant geologic event. The lady from Thailand, she was accurate and hit on the dot the magnitude 7.7 earthquake that just hit Myanmar and Burma, March 28, 2025. And the prophet from Japan, she had a whole bunch of dreams in like the 60s and beyond. She was smack on with the magnitude 9.1 earthquake in Japan, March 11th, 2011. So to get the big events right is like makes me look at things a little bit more closely. They've had some misses, okay? They've had some like political misses in terms of like we think this person's going to be out or whatever. They're wrong with that. There's a couple other dates that weren't satisfied, but they hit the big ones, which is like, okay, there's there may be something to this. So here we have the Western Tropical Astrology chart for July 5th at 3:20 a.m. for Tokyo, Japan. And I said it for this time because the Japanese prophet, she identified July 5th, and even I read something about 2 a.m. being the time. Well, at 3:20 a.m. we actually have our midheaven here in Pisces on Gong Gong, which is a dwarf planet named after the Chinese serpent god of tsunamis and earthquakes. And it's in Pisces right now for like 100 years. We have the North Node here as well. So this seems to be like a kind of a key time. Midheaven being you're at the center of the world, the world stage, all eyes are on you effectively, right? This is like in the light of the sun, whereas the IC, which is opposite, is like hidden underneath the surface. We see a grand water trine on this date, right? So we have Jupiter just having moved into Cancer. That's water, right? We have the Sun in Cancer, just having finished doing a Jupiter-Sun conjunction. We have in Scorpio the Moon just having moved in. We also have Black Moon Lilith, and then of course we have what I just outlined there. So really powerful astrology for June 5th, which is quite wild. This grand water trine, and then you'll notice here Saturn and Neptune at that date are almost as close as they will get in July. Their closest is like 13 arc minutes of separation, and then they come back and they actually go conjunct at 0 degrees of Aries in February of next year. But they get within just arc minutes of each other in July of 2025 because Neptune moves in. Saturn has just moved in. Neptune moved in earlier, but Neptune stations retrograde on July 4th. And if you study astrology, when a planet or something stations retrograde, that amplifies the energy because that effectively means that if you're looking up at the night sky, it's stationary in the night sky from our perspective here on Earth. So it stations, and Neptune's a ruler of Pisces, the modern ruler. It has just stationed retrograde on July 4th, and then Saturn has just moved into Aries in May, like late May. So it has just shifted in, and they're at nearly their closest there with only 19 arc minutes of separation. I think the closest is 13 arc minutes, and that's just like mid-July. But they're basically there. Very, very, very close together. So if you're looking at Neptune in the sky, you're also seeing Saturn at the same time, effectively. And they're appearing in the morning because the sun is ahead of them. And then they will shift back into Pisces later this year, and then they will move back into Aries. So they're moving over this final axis point, the very end of the zodiac and the beginning of the zodiac. That transition between like water and fire, deep ocean and new volcanism, basically, which is super resonant with there perhaps being some sort of massive volcanic explosion in the ocean that no one was really aware of. So that is active. There's some other things here as well, but the main thing is basically that we have these two guys there nearest their conjunction. We have this grand water trine supporting all this water energy. We have Uranus at the final degree of Taurus, Taurus being representative of the Earth, it's fixed Earth. Uranus being this agent of change and earthquakes in a trine to Pluto. And we also have this sextile there between Neptune and Pluto. We'll get into that more later. That's like the 495-year cycle that's unfolding at this moment in time. So we'll talk about that more. But let's go back to Google Earth here and talk a little bit more about this prophetic stuff. So we have the information right here, and it's Ryo Tatsuki. She's a Japanese manga artist. I believe it's, yeah, Japanese manga artist. She published in July of 1999 this manga called The Future I Saw. She had these prophetic dreams, and she saw a massive underwater eruption and or explosion. She didn't exactly know what, just something massive that generated a huge tsunami about 100 feet tall that just like absolutely devastates Southeast Asia. And it occurred, in her mind, in between Japan and the Philippines. If we zoom out here a little bit, like kind of in this zone supposedly. And also she then had a follow-up vision of it where she saw these dragons conjoining, and we see these dragons here. We'll look at the webpage in just a little bit, but we see these two dragons kind of pointing in the direction perhaps of where this thing is going to occur according to her vision. Again, nothing's guaranteed. I'm not at all going to be surprised if July 5th goes by and nothing happens. Okay, don't think I'm going to be like, oh my God, it didn't happen. Like, I'm not going to be surprised at all if nothing happens. But I think this stuff is interesting. It's my channel, so that's why I present it. And there's a lot of chatter on this. I wanted to provide some of these other data points that seem to be like clicking into place. So it's worth exploring. And so she accurately predicted the magnitude 9.1 earthquake that occurred in Japan. This is 2011. That was very, very catastrophic. That caused the Fukushima meltdown. That is nuclear, right? So we have this nuclear component too, which I'm going to get into. But you'll see how this nuclear angle is baked into this. And then also our other prophet here is Morpra, known as Thailand's Nostradamus. And she's claimed to have a vision of a global catastrophe, possibly triggered by multiple undersea earthquakes occurring in between Japan and the Philippines. And she accurately predicted that magnitude 7.7 earthquake in Myanmar, Burma, just a couple months ago, March 28th, 2025. So that is like, you know, the two are coming together. In my mind, in general, like 3 of something in a row is a good trend. If you have 2, you start to see maybe there's something to it. If we've had like multiple people come out with these visions, I'd be even more inclined to put more weight on them. But we've had 2 people, not like 3 or a dozen or something, but still it's interesting, and they're both very resonant with each other. So let's check out this Japanese manga article talking about this. And yeah, she made an accurate prediction on the 2011 earthquake, magnitude 9.1. And there's more detail in here. So according to her, she had a vision of the waters of the Pacific Ocean south of Japan rising up just like bubbles suddenly rising up when a sloppy soup comes to a boil. And then 23 years later, on July 5th, 2021, before the deadline, she had another dream about the same catastrophe, which said the real catastrophe will come in July 2025. So she was looking at the Earth from the sky, just like with Google Earth, and the ocean floor between Japan and the Philippines burst with a bang. As a result, waves spread in all directions. A huge tsunami swept over the countries of the Pacific Ocean, maybe 100 feet tall. That's like a massive tsunami, according to her. And it inundated 1/3 to 1/4 of the Pacific side of the Japanese archipelago, and the impact of the wave pushed up the land. So it seemed as if Hong Kong, Taiwan, and even the Philippines were connected by land. Now, of course, remember, in dreams, there's fluidity with this stuff, and so it's not going to manifest exactly as, you know, seen in a dream. She also saw these 2 dragons heading towards the epicenter, and this is kind of interesting, where we get this image of these 2 dragons right here. And I pointed that out on Google Earth earlier, but this image does a nice job at kind of outlining them. And this one definitely has like a dragon structure to it. There's Hawaii, where we've just had this, you know, volcanic eruption making the sign of Aries, which is very interesting. And then here's this other dragon, according to, you know, some people are speculating on this and filling in some gaps, and we don't know, again, if it's going to happen or not. We hope it doesn't. But that is, you know, we're seeing these little details, which is kind of interesting. These are the countries that are most likely to be affected if this is to occur: Japan, the Philippines, Indonesia, Taiwan, China, island of Guam, Palau, and South Korea. And then here's like the zoom in. If you get something in that area, check out how the shock waves just hit this entire zone. You know, millions and millions and hundreds of millions of people live in the zone, maybe a billion even. I mean, there's tons of people in Japan, Indonesia, Philippines, like probably close to 1 billion people live in that zone. And what's interesting about this, let's go even a little bit further. New world coming after the catastrophe. Here's where astrology provides a little bit more evidence for this, or at least it's archetypally resonant, okay? She dreams that after this catastrophe, there's a glorious future coming, and the whole planet will be bright and shiny. Everyone will live vibrantly, and it'll be an age of the mind. Be a world where everyone helps and cooperates and everything moves more positively. So the real miracle is a change in our minds. After the catastrophe comes the spiritual evolution, the spiritual era, the evolution of our mind and soul. And what is interesting about that to me is we can actually go back to our astrology chart, and I think it's right here, is that Pluto has just shifted into Aquarius. Aquarius is all about the mind and intellect, and it's an air sign. Air sign, or the air elements in general, are related to the mind. Okay, Earth is the body, water is emotions, air is your mind, and fire is your spirit. So we have Pluto just having moved into that. We have the age of Aquarius up next. Right now we're still in the age of Pisces if you talk about the precession of the equinoxes, but eventually we will have Aquarius housing the sun rising during the equinox. And so we'll be in the age of Aquarius. This is, you know, many people have talked about how this is going to be a great enlightenment era. And if we go into like Vedic astrology, we're moving out of Kali Yuga into Dwarpa. I think it's Dwapara Yuga, which is, you know, there's this increasing light and consciousness. And so it's all very resonant with that. In the background, we also have this Gemini and, or sorry, not Gemini. We have this Neptune and Pluto synodic cycle. And so my buddy Dan Waits at World Astrology Report has talked ad nauseum about this. I've linked a video on this in the video description, though he has many more. They have a 495-year synodic cycle, and they're making these conjunctions in the sign of Gemini. Again, all Western tropical astrology for this, okay? So they're going to be moving through and conjuncting the sign of Gemini actually for a long time, for like a few thousand years after this. Like we looked at the ephemerai data, calculated that out. It's going to be in Gemini for a while. And they've been doing it. This last one was at 8 degrees of Gemini, which seems to be connected to nuclear technology. And they met up at the end of the 19th century, okay? So that's the conjunction. And then there were significant events as it relates to UFOs and extraterrestrials and things of that nature and plasma technology. There's also been significant developments as it relates to nukes and like bombs and warfare in relation to this cycle. And so they had a semi-sextile earlier on. Then they had their sextile, their opening, sorry, not their final opening sextile. That's a first opening sextile, okay? So the first opening sextile. And that is, that really clicked into effect around 1950, as we see here. Then it petered off, came back around 1980, 1990, then took a really big dip. This is the distance between them to make that perfect sextile. And then we have it popping up one last time in 2025 through 2032 or so before they move on, and then they go into an opening square, okay, which is going to be a harder aspect. Well, what happened in 1950? A whole bunch of nuclear testing, right? Things then kind of cooled off. Then what happened in like 1980, 1990? Oh, that's like the fall of the USSR and the Cold War is over now. And that's also the end, you know, supposedly of nuclear testing for the main world powers, you know, USA, Soviet Union, France, etc. Supposedly 1990s, that's when they stopped. Then things really took a big dip. You know, we had a lot of nuclear reactors built during this time frame. You know, in the United States, France, all across the world. Then there was really none, and now we have this this kind of like renewed interest in nuclear technology popping up at this moment in time. If we go to our, check this out. If we go to our government website here, presidential action. So basically executive orders from the president. If you scroll down to the bottom, of course, they're always, you know, doing dozens of these, but they signed a slew of these orders on May 23rd. So here's the first one: deploying advanced nuclear reactor technologies for national security, May 23rd. And then ordering the reform of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, May 23rd. More nuclear reactor stuff here, all on May 23rd, which is in that opening sextile, the final one, time frame. Again, right, it's 2025. So we are seeing this manifest right now in real time. And if we go to this very interesting article, we've actually lost some nuclear weapons. So the US military is missing 6 nuclear weapons, and they were lost mostly in the 50s. So 1950 is the first one. This does not have a plutonium core, but it fell into the Pacific Ocean, has a bunch of enriched uranium. And then we have 1956 here, and this was lost in the Mediterranean here. So another, nuke missing in the ocean. Then we have 1958, again, all within that middle opening sextile period for Neptune and Pluto. Then we had some bombs actually dropped, like in North Carolina. I think it's this one here. Yeah, this is the mouth of the Savannah River in Georgia. Yeah, I heard about that one. That almost detonated. It was really bad. Then North Carolina, so this is all land-based. And there's probably more than just this, by the way. Here's the one I really want to point out. December 5th, 1965. A 1 megaton thermonuclear weapon managed to roll off the deck of the USS Ticonderoga and fell into the Pacific Ocean. Went down to a depth of 16,000 feet, the deep abyss, and was never seen again. They admitted it 15 years later. They said it was 500 miles off land, but in fact, they were just 80 miles off the coast of the Ryukyu Islands in Japan. And so that is like right in this zone that has been identified by these, prophetic visions as being the site of this disaster, 1 megaton bomb. And then a final bomb was lost 1968. A nuclear attack submarine actually sank off the Azores. So this is the Atlantic. And all the crew members died, and so did those nuclear-tipped weapons, which had a total yield of 250 kilotons. But it's that 5th one, which I find very interesting. So these are all linked in the video description, by the way, these articles. But let's go back to Google Earth, and we see here, this is just a rough marker I put in for where that nuclear bomb was lost. But we see this trench, and they lost a 1 megaton nuke, December 5th, 1965. Somewhere in this zone, there is a 1 megaton nuclear bomb that's just chilling, all right? And it's like ready to go. That's not one of these like partial, doesn't have the plutonium core. That's like ready to go. So let us see what an underwater nuclear blast looks like, okay? This is, and let's see what the size of this is. They may have the actual size of this bomb in the description. So the nuclear blast is calculated to be 9 kilotons of TNT. And I'm not sure how many megatons, 9 kilotons of TNT. So the one that rolled off is 1 megaton, okay? So that one's much bigger. But let's see what this small nuclear blast looks like off the coast. And this is at a depth of 150 meters, okay? So this is wild. Check this out. And this massive explosion, look at that. Shockwave, gets a second wind right here. Look at that. That's a small bomb. And it's at a shallow depth, keep that in mind. But that's a small nuclear bomb. And so how many of these things are actually underwater that we don't know about? Those are the 6 that we know about. How many are underwater that we don't know about? Their sizes, their stability, right? Like, is there a point where the seawater will corrode the electronics that will just trigger a detonation? Or will that like stop it from detonating? We just don't know. We just know that we have enriched nuclear products now scattered across the oceans, which we've only mapped about 5%. And the majority of global volcanism happens in the oceans. So we have, again, for example, we have like Hawaii, very active volcano, okay? We have, of course, volcanoes all around the globe. Some of them are more active than others. We watch them, we track them. But let's zoom out. You can actually set up the globe here so you don't even see land. Like the Pacific is so big that if you look at it from a certain angle, you barely see any land. It's a massive, 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 massive amount of the planet. And there is so much underwater volcanism that occurs across the globe that we have no knowledge of. Because a lot of volcanic activity, you identify it with earthquakes and with seismographs, but they're low magnitude earthquakes. You don't pick them up with a global seismic network. For example, we have axial seamount, which is around here. Yeah, so here it is. That's the caldera for axial seamount. And let me zoom out a bit, okay? We see this guy. We only really started getting good data when we deployed seismographs around the caldera directly, because these are low magnitude earthquakes and they're far away from the global seismic systems. A lot of things that create these sort of, sound disturbances. So you need to get seismographs right on it. Well, do you think we have good coverage of all this with seismographs in 20,000 feet of water? No, we don't. So we know very little. The point I'm making is that we know very little about what is happening in our deep oceans, in the deep abyss. And so we should pay attention to these deep sea messengers, in my opinion, that are coming up. 4 oarfish sightings in less than a week, 2 in New Zealand, 1 in Tasmania, and then the oddball, 1 all the way here in India. And that in fact was the biggest one. Took 7 men to hold it up. Massive, massive creatures. Very bizarre, living in the deep abyss, coming up to the surface and basically immediately dying because of depressurization and probably more. I'm not an expert on oarfish. Then we have these, these 2 prophetic kind of visions from different people for something occurring here July 2025. We have a missing nuke right in the area. Very, very bizarre. And the astrology, as I discussed, is very resonant with all this. And we know we're seeing in our actual day-to-day this renewed interest in nuclear technology and also an escalation in nuclear saber rattling and all this across the globe. So yeah, some really crazy stuff happening. You wonder what sort of technology exists that we're not privy to. Because, if you can keep something under wraps, you're going to do that. And so this is an interesting little side note here. Let me show you. In 1962, there was a concept for the largest rocket ever. And this is called the Dragon rocket, if I'm correct. Let me see what it's called. Yeah, the Sea Dragon rocket was going to be the largest ever nuclear rocket to exist, some sea launch system. It was never developed as far as we know, but the name I find very interesting because Ryo Tatsuzuki, she saw these dragons like coming together. So there's I just presenting this information and these ideas and these speculations for you to just kind of think about. We know that the astrology of 2025 is very, very powerful. 2026 is very, very powerful because of this conjunction there, meeting at the beginning of the world axis, 0 degrees of Aries next February, but them coming to a near conjunction here in July during solar maximum when all this energy from the sun feeds in and drives these geophysical systems like earthquakes and volcanoes. And we see this grand water trine on this date at that time that's been identified. And that's very powerful. So the fact that Jupiter just moved in for the next year, it's exalted in Jupiter. The sun is there as well. The moon has just moved into Scorpio. Deep secrets being revealed. She talked about this age of mind and this new prosperous era. That's Pluto in Aquarius. That's the age of Aquarius coming up. You can see how all this is very, very resonant with the astrology, which makes me pay attention to it. And the North Node is there, which is this karmic fate point. So yeah, that is what I wanted to present today. The doomsday fish, 4 of them now. I presented last time that there was 1, now there's 4. I'll keep you up to date with what is happening on this channel, not only with some of this more speculative stuff, but also just with the hard science in terms of what's happening with earthquakes, space weather, and more. We did just have a magnitude 6.4 earthquake in Chile. So I just want to show you that really quick. If you are a regular viewer, we just had that happen with like the past 2 hours or so at a depth of 76.5 kilometers. That's a big earthquake. And we see that right there, not in the oceans, but because of the subduction zone. But we've been having some elevated earthquake activity now for a while because of the space weather, and perhaps that's going to feed into what's happening with our oceans, because we're also seeing increased volcanic activity, the pyroclastic flow, Mount Etna, pyroclastic flow and huge lava fountains at Fuego. We've had eruptions off the coast of Kamchatka with Seveluch volcano, and then there's been volcanic eruptions in Japan. There's been volcanic eruptions in Indonesia, Hawaii, and also there's activity at Camp Gray, and of course there's always volcanoes going, but there seems to be a pretty interesting uptick occurring right now. I think it's all connected to these more archetypally resonant manifestation patterns that are unfolding at this moment in time. So again, I'll keep you up to date on that. Wishing all of you well. Thank you so much for watching. Smash that like button to show your support. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't done so already. We're on the road to 500K. We'll get there sooner rather than not. So make sure you get in before that first 500K is reached. We're happy to see you there. And yeah, again, wishing all of you well, love and light. And if you don't like this story, you don't want that to occur, then pray for that not to occur, because it's all about, I think the future. I think there's many possible futures that exist that people may get glimpses of, and the future that does occur is the one that we collectively manifest. So we have to decide, what do we want to collectively manifest? And peace, prosperity, harmony, those all sound like great things. I think we can do that without the catastrophe as well. So we hope that nothing happens on July 5th. But at the very least, it's an interesting story, and there's a lot of little things that are occurring that make me watch. I'm watching this very closely. So I'll keep you up to date every step of the way. Again, wishing all of you well. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you in the next video.